Every year, wildfires consume millions of acres, and every year, humanity's response arrives the same way, too late. By the time crews reach the fire line, it has already doubled. The golden hour is gone. But a new generation of autonomous AI drones doesn't wait for the call. It's already watching. These machines detect heat signatures invisible to the human eye and respond before a single flame breaks the surface. This is how AI is rewriting the first chapter of every wildfire before it becomes one. Hit subscribe because the way humanity fights fire just changed forever. For most of human history, wildfires were a natural part of the landscape. They burned, they cleared, they moved on. But something shifted in the late 20th century. Fires stopped behaving the way they always had. The rules changed. Droughts grew longer, forests grew drier, and the window between ignition and catastrophe shrank from days down to minutes. In 2023, wildfires burned more than 15 million hectares across Canada alone, the single worst fire season ever recorded. Smoke blanketed cities as far away as Europe. Entire towns evacuated in hours. The scale was unlike anything before. The traditional model of wildfire response depends entirely on human crews reaching the fire line within the first critical hour. But terrain, smoke, and sheer distance mean crews often arrive to find the fire has already escaped containment. That first hour, the golden hour, is the only window where a small fire can still stay small. Miss it, and you're no longer fighting a fire. You're managing a disaster that has already written its own rules. This is the problem that conventional technology, satellites, watchtowers, aerial patrols, has never been able to fully solve. Satellites pass overhead every few hours. Watchtowers rely on human observers. Aerial patrols cover too little ground, far too slowly. That detection gap has cost billions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of acres lost every single fire season. What the system needs isn't more of the same. It needs something that never sleeps, never blinks, and never waits. That something is already being built, and it doesn't look anything like the firefighting tools that came before it. The first piece of the puzzle is detection, knowing a fire exists before it has any chance to grow. Companies like Pano AI have deployed networks of high-definition cameras across fire-prone regions of the United States and Australia. Each camera rotates continuously, feeding live imagery into an AI system trained to recognize the earliest signatures of smoke. Not the billowing columns visible from miles away, but the faint, almost invisible wisps that appear in the first minutes. Pano AI's system can detect a fire and alert crews in under 60 seconds from first smoke appearance. But detection is only half the equation. The other half is getting something to the fire before crews can arrive. That's where autonomous drone systems enter the picture. Pre-positioned near high-risk zones, already armed, already waiting for the signal. A company called Rain is developing exactly this, autonomous drones that pre-deploy into wildfire-prone terrain during high-risk weather conditions. When a fire is detected, the drone doesn't wait for a human to authorize the launch, it moves. Onboard thermal sensors lock onto the heat signature, the drone descends and delivers a targeted fire-retardant payload directly onto the ignition point. Not a blanket drop across an acre, a precise, targeted suppression of the fire at its very origin. This is the fundamental shift, from reacting to a fire that exists to intercepting one that is just beginning. The technology is not yet fully operational at scale, but the framework, detect, deploy, suppress, is already being proven. To understand what this technology means in practice, you have to go back to the summer of 2021. The Dixie fire in Northern California became the first single-origin fire in state history to exceed 1 million acres. It burned for nearly 3 months, destroyed over 1,000 structures, forced tens of thousands of residents to flee. Investigators later determined the fire originated from a single ignition point, a fault on a utility line. A single spark, left undetected for long enough to become a disaster that reshaped an entire region. This is exactly the scenario that systems like Rain and Pano AI are designed to interrupt at the source. Pano AI's cameras are now active across California, Oregon, and parts of Australia, watching the zones most at risk. In real deployments, the system has flagged fires within minutes of ignition, hours before traditional detection methods would have. For the crews on the ground, that gap in time is the difference between containment and catastrophe. Rain's founders built the company with one question at its core. What if the drone gets there first? Not as a replacement for firefighters, as the first responder that buys them the time they desperately need. It is a fundamentally different philosophy, one that treats the first 60 seconds as the most valuable resource. The case for AI wildfire detection isn't built on theory. It's built on results already happening in the field. Pano AI's network currently covers more than 100 million acres of fire-prone land across the United States alone. In controlled evaluations, the system detected fires an average of 11 times faster than traditional ground-based detection methods. 11 times faster. In wildfire terms, that is not a marginal improvement. That is a categorical difference. Pano AI has reported over 2,000 fire detections to date, with a false positive rate below 5%. That accuracy matters enormously. Every false alarm pulls crews away from real threats and burns through limited emergency resources. On the suppression side, Rain completed successful autonomous flight trials in high-risk terrain during the 2024 fire season. The company has raised significant venture funding and is working toward FAA approval for fully autonomous suppression operations. Beyond individual companies, the U.S. Forest Service has been expanding its own drone programs for aerial fire monitoring since 2022. DARPA has also funded research into coordinated drone swarm behavior, specifically designed for wildfire mapping and perimeter tracking. Multiple drones operating together can map an active fire perimeter in real time, feeding data directly to ground crews. That situational awareness alone, knowing exactly where a fire is moving, can save lives on the ground. California alone spends over $3 billion annually on wildfire suppression, a figure that has tripled in a decade. Early interception, even reducing a fire by a fraction of its eventual size, can cut those costs dramatically. The numbers make a clear argument. The cost of deploying these systems is a fraction of what fires destroy. In Australia, where fire seasons now overlap with the northern hemispheres, the urgency for faster detection is even more acute. Pilot programs using AI camera networks similar to Pano AI's model are already being trialed in New South Wales. The technology works. The data is compelling, but scaling it across entire continents is a different challenge altogether. Airspace is the first obstacle. Autonomous drones operating in remote fire zones must navigate complex FAA regulatory frameworks. Beyond visual line-of-sight operations, flying drones where no human operator can see them remain heavily restricted in the U.S. Rain and others are working directly with the FAA to build the legal framework for autonomous wildfire response operations. It is a slow process, but the regulatory path is moving, driven in part by the scale of recent fire seasons. Liability is the second major question. If an autonomous drone causes property damage during a suppression run, who is responsible? These are not hypothetical concerns. They are the real legal barriers that every deployment must navigate before going live. Then there is the question of what these systems can actually do and what they were never designed to handle. Autonomous drones are not designed to fight megafires. No drone system on Earth can suppress a fire burning at that scale. What they can do is intercept the fire before it reaches that scale, and that distinction matters enormously. Early interception is not a cure for the wildfire crisis. Climate change is still driving longer, hotter, drier fire seasons. Drone systems do not address the root conditions that create wildfires. They address the window in which fires can be stopped. Critics argue that focusing on technological response risks drawing attention away from the harder work of forest management and prevention. Prescribed burns, fuel load reduction, and smarter land use policy remain the most powerful long-term tools available to fire managers. Drone detection and suppression work best as part of that broader system, not as a replacement for it. There are also equity questions. The communities most exposed to wildfire risk are often the least resourced to benefit from new technology. Rural and low-income fire zones need this technology most, but deployment decisions tend to follow investment, not vulnerability. Despite these challenges, the momentum behind AI wildfire technology is accelerating, driven by fire seasons that leave no room for delay. Insurance companies are beginning to factor AI detection coverage into their wildfire risk models for properties in high danger zones. State governments in California and Oregon have begun integrating drone detection data directly into their emergency dispatch and response systems. The vision emerging is not a world without wildfires. It is a world that catches them before they catch us. That shift from reactive suppression to proactive interception may be the most important change in wildfire management in a generation, and it is happening now, not in a laboratory, not in a simulation, in the forests that are burning. Several major utility companies in California are now funding direct partnerships with AI detection firms to protect their infrastructure corridors. The logic is straightforward. A single transmission line ignition like the one that started the Dixie fire costs billions. Internationally, the technology is attracting serious attention from governments in Southern Europe, where wildfire seasons have worsened dramatically since 2020. Greece and Portugal have both initiated drone monitoring pilot programs following devastating fire seasons that destroyed entire hillside communities. The swarm element, multiple drones coordinating autonomously without a central operator, represents the next frontier of this technology. Where a single drone covers one ignition point, a swarm-coordinated system can monitor an entire valley simultaneously in real time. DARPA's investment in swarm coordination research is laying the groundwork for that capability, and the results are already promising. Wildfires will not be solved by any single technology, but the way we respond to them is already changing. Autonomous drones that detect, deploy, and suppress in the critical first minutes are no longer a concept. They exist. They are being tested, they are being funded, and they are being deployed into the landscapes that need them most. The forests are still burning, but for the first time, something is already airborne before the flames take hold. Fires that once burned for months may one day be stopped in their first 60 seconds. That future is being built right now. Hit like, share this with someone, and subscribe to SynthCosmos. We cover the science reshaping our world as we know it, every single week. We'll see you in the next one.